Tonight we journey to the heart of Edo period Japan, to the sprawling, silent corridors of power where the fate of a nation is decided not just on battlefields, but in the hushed, perfect stillness of a tea room. You are not a samurai, not a diplomat, not a scheming courtier. You are a pair of hands, recently calloused from rice paddies, now trembling in the damp, chilly air of a stone-lined preparation room deep within the shogun's castle. The air smells of tatami mats, aged wood, and the faint, ever-present threat of disgrace. You've been plucked from your village, from a life of mud and sun and predictable hardship, and thrust into a world where a single errant splinter on a bamboo tool can be construed as an act of treason. You probably won't survive this, not if you think your old life has prepared you for the psychological warfare waged with a bow and a whisper. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Now, dim the lights, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It began with the tax collector. Not with a grand summons or a scroll sealed with the shogun's crest, but with the local magistrate's deputy, a man whose breath always smelled faintly of pickled plums and whose eyes missed nothing. He stood in your family's single-room hut while the rain poured outside, his presence making the fire seem to burn colder. He wasn't there for rice or millet this time. He was there for you. The Tokugawa Bakufu requires a servant of nimble fingers and a silent tongue, he'd said, his voice a low drone. Your third son has been observed. He is sufficiently insignificant. It wasn't a request. It was an extraction. Your mother wept, but whether from pride or terror, you couldn't tell. Your father simply stared at the floor, his shoulders slumped with the weight of an order that could not be refused. The journey to Edo was a blur of forced marches and bewildering sights. You'd never seen a road so wide, so clean, so devoid of potholes and animal dung. You'd never seen people dressed in such silks, their faces painted a stark white, gliding past as if on wheels. And then, the castle. It wasn't a building, it was a mountain range crafted by man, a complex of towering, swooping roofs of grey tile, white plaster walls that gleamed in the sun, and moats so wide you couldn't throw a stone across them. You entered through a service gate, so small and plain it was almost invisible, and were immediately swallowed by the labyrinth within. The sheer scale of the place was a historical fact you were now living. Edo Castle was one of the largest fortifications ever built, its grounds encompassing over 200 acres, a city within a city designed to impress and intimidate in equal measure. You felt the intimidation part deep in your bones. You were handed off from one stone-faced guard to another, each one less interested in you than the last, until you were deposited in a small, windowless antechamber that smelled powerfully of vinegar and hinoki wood. You waited for hours, your stomach a tight knot of hunger and fear. Finally, a man entered. He was older, his back slightly stooped, his hands clasped before him. He wore a simple, dark blue kimono, immaculately clean, but his eyes held a terrifying, ancient calm. This was Kiyoshi, the head tea whisk cleaner. He looked you up and down, not with malice, but with the detached assessment of a carpenter inspecting a piece of timber. You will never touch the shogun, he said, his voice barely a whisper, yet it filled the small room. You will likely never even hear his voice directly, but your work will be 2 arms' lengths from his lips. In this place, that is both an honor and a death sentence. A single flaw in your duty, a single moment of carelessness, and you will not be dismissed. You will simply vanish. He let that word hang in the fragrant air. Vanish. It was more frightening than any threat of a sword. Historians still argue whether the infamous Metsuki, the shogun's secret censors and inspectors, were a highly organized secret police force or a more ad hoc network of informants, but the effect was the same, a pervasive, chilling paranoia that ensured absolute loyalty. You were now part of that system, a tiny, insignificant cog in a machine of immense power and profound silence. Kiyoshi gestured for you to follow him. Come. Your life is over. Your service has begun. He led you out of the antechamber and into a slightly larger, but equally austere, room. This was the purification chamber. The walls were bare, save for a single scroll with a single character for purity. In the center of the room, on a low, black lacquered stand, rested a single object. It was a small, delicate thing, fashioned from a single piece of bamboo, its many fine prongs splaying out like the legs of a captured spider. It looked fragile, almost silly. But the way Kiyoshi looked at it, the way he approached it with a reverence usually reserved for a shrine deity, told you everything. This was the chasen, the Shogun's tea whisk. And for the rest of your days, or until you vanished, its care, its cleaning, its absolute perfection, was the sole purpose of your existence. The weight of the whisk is not in its physical substance, which is almost nothing, a few slivers of aged bamboo that would barely register on a scale. The weight is in the silence that surrounds it, a silence so profound it seems to have its own mass, pressing down on your eardrums and filling your lungs with every cautious breath you take. Kiyoshi does not speak as he stands before the lacquered stand. He simply exists in a state of absolute focus, his entire being channeled through his eyes, which are fixed on the chasen. You stand a half step behind and to his left, as instructed, your own hands clenched at your sides, terrified that a single, untimely twitch will be interpreted as irreverence. This is your first full day, and the lesson is not about technique, not yet. The lesson is about gravity. The lesson is about fear. He finally moves, his hands rising from his sides with a slow, fluid grace that seems unnatural for a man of his years. He does not pick up the whisk. Not yet. His fingers hover just above it, and you see the countless, almost invisible fine lines and tiny nicks on his fingertips, a permanent map of a lifetime spent handling the delicate bamboo strands. This, he whispers, and the word is like a stone dropped into a bottomless well, is not a tool. It is an instrument of state. The unification of Japan under the Tokugawa shogunate brought an end to the Sengo period, the warring states era, but the battles did not disappear. They merely changed form. They are now fought here, in this room, with purity and precision as the weapons. He lets that sink in. You think of the great battles you heard stories about in your village, the cavalry charges, the volleys of arrows, the clashing of katana. It is impossible to connect those grand, violent images to this silent, motionless piece of craftwork on a stand. Kiyoshi's hand descends, his thumb and forefinger closing with impossible gentleness around the whisk's handle. He lifts it, and it is as if he is lifting the entire world. He turns it slowly, and you see it properly for the first time. It is a masterpiece of subtlety. The bamboo is a deep, golden brown, polished not with any abrasive, but by years, decades perhaps, of careful handling and the steam of countless bowls of tea. The prongs, or joku, are exquisitely thin, tapering to fine points, and they are not perfectly uniform. There is a slight, intentional irregularity to them, a quirk of the artisan's design that allows them to agitate the thick, powdered matcha tea into a perfect, velvety froth. The highest quality tea whisks are never perfectly symmetrical. The slight variations in the prongs are what create the ideal vortex in the tea bowl, a fact known only to the tea masters and the few who care for their instruments. He brings the whisk closer to your face, so close you can smell the faint, ghostly aroma of 1,000 past tea ceremonies, the bitter matcha, the clean scent of hot water, the hint of charcoal from the brazier. You will memorize every curve of the handle, he instructs, his voice still low. You will know the exact flexibility of every single prong. You will be able to feel, with your eyes closed, the tiny, almost imperceptible ridge on the third prong from the left on the southern face. This is your map. This is your territory. Any change, any deviation from this state, is an enemy incursion. It is your duty to repel it. Historians still argue whether the extreme codification of the tea ceremony under Sen no Rikyu and his successors was a genuine spiritual pursuit or a brilliantly disguised method of social and political control, forcing rival daimyo to compete in aesthetics rather than warfare. As you stare at this whisk, at the absolute power it represents, the latter seems terrifyingly plausible. He does not let you touch it. Not today. Perhaps not for many days. Instead, he has you begin by cleaning the stand. This is not a simple matter of wiping it down. You are given a square of pure, undyed silk from a small, locked chest. You must fold it in a specific way, creating a clean surface without any creases that might trap dust. Then, you are given a small vial of specially prepared water, infused with the oils of the kaya tree, a known insect repellent. You dampen the silk with exactly 3 drops, administered from a tiny silver dropper. You then wipe the lacquered surface in a single, continuous, clockwise motion, starting from the center and moving outwards in an expanding spiral. Any hesitation, any backtracking, is a fault. You do this 11 times. The first time, your hand shakes, and you leave a faint, smeared trail. Kiyoshi does not reprimand you. He simply takes the silk from your hand, discards it into a dedicated impure basket to be burned later, and gives you a new one. You start again. The weight of the whisk is not in the bamboo. It is in the silence, in the silk, in the 3 drops of water, and in the 11 perfect, spiraling passes. It is a weight you will carry every moment you are in this castle, and you are only just beginning to feel its crushing burden. The lesson in purification begins not with water, but with fire. Before the whisk can ever touch a liquid, it must be cleansed of any lingering malevolent spirits or, as Kiyoshi more practically puts it, the stale breath of the room. He produces a small ceramic dish and a single, slender stick of incense from a sealed lacquer box. The incense is not the heavy, cloying sandalwood you sometimes smelled in the village temple. This is a lighter, more elusive scent, a blend of aloeswood and a hint of plum blossom, specially formulated for the shogun's tea chambers. He lights it with a coal from a small, perpetually burning brazier in the corner, a flame that is never allowed to die. The smoke curls upward, a pale, graceful ghost in the still air. You will pass the whisk through the smoke, he instructs, holding the chasen by its handle. Not too close. The heat will warp the bamboo. You are not cooking it. You are inviting the purity of the air to adhere to its surface. He demonstrates, moving the whisk in a slow, figure-8 pattern through the rising column of scent. You watch, mesmerized by the ritualistic precision. This is the first of 17 separate steps in the cleansing ritual, a process that can take over 2 hours from start to finish. Next comes the preliminary visual inspection, a process that feels less like looking and more like meditation. You are to hold the whisk up to the light of a single, paper-shaded lantern, the only illumination permitted in the purification chamber. The light is soft and diffuse, perfect for revealing the subtlest of imperfections. You must rotate the whisk slowly, examining each of the 80, you counted them, twice, fine prongs for any sign of discoloration, splintering, or, heaven forbid, a speck of dust that survived the previous day's cleaning. Your eyes begin to water from the strain, the fine bamboo strands blurring into a golden haze. Kiyoshi's voice is a soft murmur beside you. The human eye is fallible. You must learn to see with your fingertips as well. He has you close your eyes and run the very pad of your index finger, ever so gently, down the length of a single prong. You feel the satiny smoothness of the aged bamboo, the almost imperceptible ridge he mentioned yesterday, the living texture of the thing. It is an intimacy that feels shocking, like touching a holy relic. This tactile familiarity is your first and best defense against the unseen. Only after the incense and the inspection do you even approach the subject of water. And the water is not simply water. There are 3 bowls, each made of a different material and each serving a distinct purpose. The first bowl is a shallow, wide-mouthed vessel of unglazed, porous earthenware. This contains cold water drawn that very morning from a specific well within the castle grounds, a well reserved solely for the tea ceremony. The porous clay allows the water to breathe, as Kiyoshi explains. You use a small bamboo ladle to pour this water into a second bowl, this one of polished camellia wood. Here, you add 3 pinches of white salt from a small jade jar. The salt, a mainstream historical fact of purification rituals in Shinto and tea ceremony alike, is meant to act as a spiritual disinfectant, warding off impurity. You swish the water gently with a special, larger whisk used only for this preparatory step, dissolving the salt. This is the whisk's first bath, a brief, swirling immersion meant to loosen any microscopic debris. It is in the water for no more than 3 seconds. The second bath is in a bowl of hot water, but not boiling. The temperature is critical, hot enough to open the pores of the bamboo and release any trapped oils from the tea, but not so hot as to cook the delicate fibers and make them brittle. You test the temperature not with a thermometer, but by flicking a few drops onto your wrist, a skill you must master. It should feel hot, but not painfully so, a sensation Kiyoshi describes as the waking heat of a spring sun. The whisk is submerged for exactly 10 heartbeats, your own, measured, steady heartbeats, forcing you into a state of calm. As it soaks, you see a faint, greenish tint seep from the bamboo, the ghost of 10,000 past whiskings of matcha. Historians still argue whether the meticulous, multi-stage tea rituals were genuinely believed to impact the flavor of the tea or if their primary function was the demonstration of ultimate control over one's environment, a power so absolute it could dictate the temperature of water and the number of heartbeats. Watching the faint green mist cloud the hot water, you feel it is probably both. The final rinse is the most nerve-wracking. The third bowl is of the finest, pale Celadon porcelain, its surface as smooth as ice. This contains the special, lightly scented water whose recipe you are not yet trusted to know. It is cool, infused with the essence of chrysanthemum and a single, mysterious ingredient Kiyoshi only calls the mountain's tear. You lift the whisk from the hot water, let it drip for a count of 5, and then lower it into the scented rinse. A single, gentle swish, and then it is lifted out, held aloft to let the pure, fragrant droplets fall back into the porcelain bowl. The ritual is complete. The whisk is now, in the eyes of the shogunate, pure. It has been passed through air, salt, heat, and scent. It is ready to create the foam upon which, you are starting to understand, the illusion of an entire nation's stability somehow rests. And you haven't even gotten to the actual cleaning and drying part yet. That comes next, and it involves feathers. The drying process is its own form of torture. You cannot simply set the purified whisk on a rack. Moisture might pool, warping the delicate prongs or, worse, encouraging the growth of mold, a disgrace that would be literally unforgivable. Instead, you must air dry it, employing a method so painstaking it feels like a form of penance. Kiyoshi produces a small box made of paulownia wood, its lid carved with a pattern of swirling mist. Inside, nestled on a bed of fresh, untreated cedar shavings, are 3 feathers. They are not just any feathers. They are the primary flight feathers of a copper pheasant, a bird considered a symbol of elegance and good fortune. Each one is over a foot long, a masterpiece of russet, black, and white barring, with a silky, almost liquid softness. You will not touch the whisk with your hands again until it is fully dry, Kiyoshi states, his tone leaving no room for question. The oils from your skin are a contaminant. The feather is an extension of the air itself. It is the only thing pure enough to guide the whisk now. Your task is to hold the feather by its quill and use its soft, trailing edge to gently cradle the whisk's handle, lifting it from the celadon bowl and transferring it to a special drying alcove, a small, ventilated niche in the wall lined with sandalwood strips. The alcove is where the previous cleaner, a man named Ato, kept the whisk. There are no visible signs of his failure, whatever it was, but a superstition hangs about the place like a bad smell. The other servants you sometimes pass in the corridors lower their voices when they speak of it. They say Ato didn't just vanish. They say he left a shadow, a stain of disgrace that seeped into the very wood. They call it the ghost of the whisk, a lingering aura of misfortune that you are now responsible for appeasing. The kind of superstition that thrives in the pressurized environment of the castle, but you find yourself offering a silent, desperate prayer to the alcove every time you approach it. Holding the whisk steady with a single, impossibly soft feather is an exercise in muscular control you never knew you lacked. The first time you try, the whisk wobbles, its prongs trembling like a frightened animal. Kiyoshi doesn't speak. He simply places a hand under your elbow, his touch surprisingly firm, steadying you. It is the first physical contact of encouragement, or perhaps merely correction, you have received from him. You take a breath, focusing all your will into your wrist, and try again. You learn to move with a slow, constant velocity, as if you are part of a slow-moving river. The transfer from bowl to alcove, a distance of perhaps 4 feet, takes a full 5 minutes. You lay the whisk carefully on the sandalwood slats, using the feather to adjust its position so that air can circulate around every single prong. Then, you must stay. You cannot leave the whisk unattended during its drying time, which is precisely 1 hour. You sit in Caesar, the formal kneeling position, on the tatami mat before the alcove, your back straight, your hands resting on your thighs. You are a guardian. You are a statue. This is the hour where the ghost of Ato feels most present. The silence in the small purification chamber is absolute, broken only by the faint, almost imaginary sigh of air moving through the ventilation slats. Your mind wanders, concocting stories of what he could have done. Did he break a prong? Did he use water that was a degree too hot? Did he simply look at the shogun the wrong way during a ceremony? Historians still argue whether the infamous compelled suicide or seppuku orders for minor infractions were as common as the popular legends suggest, or if they were a potent tool of propaganda, a myth wielded to ensure compliance. As you kneel before the whisk, watching a single, scented water droplet cling to the very tip of a bamboo prong before finally letting go and falling into the absorbent sandalwood below, the distinction feels academic. The threat is the reality you live in. The ghost is not Ato's spirit. It is the ever-present potential for a mistake that cannot be undone. The drying hour is not about moisture evaporation. It is a daily meditation on the fragility of your own existence within these walls. When the hour is finally up, and you use the pheasant feather to transfer the whisk back to its permanent lacquered stand, the relief is so profound it feels like taking a breath after being underwater for a lifetime. The ritual is complete. The whisk is safe. And for today, at least, you have not joined Ato in his shadowy fate. Your first glimpse of the shogun is not a planned audience or a formal presentation. It is a stolen moment, a sliver of sight caught through a partially open shoji screen as you are scurrying back from the kitchen wells with your daily allocation of sacred water. You are not supposed to be in this corridor. You are certainly not supposed to look. But the sound of hushed, synchronized footsteps and the rustle of heavy silk makes you freeze, pressing yourself into a shallow doorway alcove, the ceramic water jar clutched tightly to your chest. A procession glides past. First, a pair of guards in full formal attire, their faces impassive masks beneath the basket-like jingesa hats. Then, a cluster of senior advisors, their aged backs bent in postures of deep respect, their motions as fluid and precise as a dance. And then, him. Tokugawa Yenari. The Shogun. The man for whom your every waking moment, your every careful breath, is now dedicated. He is shorter than you imagined, and somehow more substantial. The paintings and woodblock prints you'd heard described in the village did not capture the sheer, physical weight of his presence. He is clad in layers of darkest blue and gray silk, the family crest, the hollyhock leaf, displayed with a subtlety that speaks of unquestioned authority. He doesn't walk so much as he is moved, a statue being transported by the currents of his court. His face is placid, almost bored, but his eyes, as they sweep briefly across the corridor, are like two chips of obsidian, missing nothing. They pass over your hiding place, and for a heart-stopping second, you feel seen, truly seen, not as a person but as an object out of place. A flaw in the composition of his world. Then the moment is over. The procession turns a corner, and the silence they left behind feels louder than their passing. You remain frozen for a full minute, the water jar feeling suddenly as heavy as a millstone. That was the man. The man who sips from a bowl frothed by the whisk you clean. The line of causality is terrifyingly direct. The encounter leaves you shaken for the rest of the day. During the purification ritual, your hands will not stop their minute trembling. Kiyoshi notices, of course. He says nothing until the whisk is safely cradled in its drying alcove and you are kneeling in your vigil. "You saw the carp today," he murmurs, his voice barely disturbing the air. You look at him, confused. He almost smiles, a rare crack in his stoic facade. The carp in the pond. He swims in his own world, surrounded by smaller fish who think they guide his direction. We are not even the water. We are the stones at the very bottom, far beneath his notice. Our only duty is to be smooth and clean, and utterly without feature. A stone that disturbs the water, even for a moment, is removed. The analogy is chillingly apparent. You are a stone. The Shogun is a carp. And your entire existence is predicated on being unnoticeable. This hierarchy is a mainstream historical fact of the Tokugawa system, a rigid social structure known as the Shinokei-osho, which placed the samurai at the top, followed by farmers, artisans, and merchants at the bottom. You, as a peasant conscripted into service, technically sit above the merchants, but within the castle walls, you are beneath everyone, a part of the unseen foundation. Your glimpse of the Shogun drives this home. The carpenters who maintain the building, the guards who patrol the halls, the cooks who prepare the food, they are all part of this intricate, silent machine designed for one purpose: to maintain the carp in his pond. Historians still argue whether this hyper-centralized feudalism, with the shogun as the absolute apex, was a stroke of genius that ensured 2 centuries of peace or a suffocating stagnation that ultimately crippled Japan. From your vantage point as a human stone at the bottom of the pond, it feels like both. The peace is undeniable. You have never known the terror of war. The stagnation is in the air you breathe, a heavy, perfumed stillness that allows no change, no deviation, no life beyond the prescribed rituals. The rest of your drying vigil is spent in a state of heightened awareness. Every sound from the corridor, the soft scuff of a servant's straw sandal, the distant call of a castle messenger, makes you flinch. You are no longer just afraid of failing the whisk. You are afraid of the pond, of the vast, silent ecosystem of power you have inadvertently glimpsed. The whisk is no longer just a whisk. It is a direct, tangible link to that obsidian-eyed carp. When you finally use the pheasant feather to return it to its stand, the act feels different. More significant. You are not just cleaning a tool. You are performing your duty as a stone. You are ensuring the water above you remains perfectly, imperceptibly still. Securing the water for the purification ritual is not a matter of simply drawing it from a well. It is your first foray into the brutal, unspoken politics of the castle's underbelly. The kitchen, a vast, steam-filled cavern of roaring fires, clattering pots, and a hierarchy as rigid as the shogun's own court, is a territory more dangerous to you than any battlefield. The water you need comes from a specific well in the third courtyard, known as the moon viewing well, whose water is prized for its softness and lack of mineral taste. But you do not draw it. That right belongs to the water brigade, a group of burly, perpetually sweating men who answer to the deputy chief of kitchen hydration, a man named Goro whose neck is thicker than your thigh and whose patience is thinner than a whisk's prong. Your first independent attempt to collect your daily ration is a lesson in humiliation. You approach the water station, your empty ceramic jar held before you like a shield. The brigade members ignore you, heaving their massive buckets with a practiced grunt. Goro stands with his massive arms crossed, watching the flow of liquid like a general surveying his troops. You clear your throat. Honorable Goro-san, you begin, using the phrase Kiyoshi drilled into you. I humbly request the day's allocation for the chasen no you. Goro's eyes, small and pig-like, slide over to you. He doesn't speak for a long moment, letting the noise and the steam fill the silence. The chasen no you, he repeats, his voice a low rumble. The whisks water. He spits a stream of tobacco juice onto the stone floor, narrowly missing your foot. The well is low today. The tea masters have first claim. Then the shogun's personal chefs. Then the senior court ladies for their baths. Perhaps tomorrow, little cleaner, there will be a drop left for your little stick. He turns his back on you. The message is clear. Your place in the pecking order is just above the floor-scrubbing apprentices. You return to the purification chamber empty-handed, your face burning with a shame that feels hotter than the kitchen fires. Kiyoshi takes one look at your empty hands and your defeated posture and gives a slow, almost imperceptible nod, as if this is a lesson he had scheduled for you. The water is not given, he says. It is negotiated. You have nothing they want, so you must offer something they need. He opens a small, personal chest and removes two items, a tiny, exquisitely carved netsuki of a badger, and a small pouch of dried matsutake mushrooms, a rare and expensive delicacy. The badger is for Goro. He collects them. It is an interest for a man of his station. The mushrooms are for the head of the water brigade. His wife is fond of them. You will not speak of the water. You will present these as gifts, expressing your admiration for their diligent work. The water will appear. It feels like bribery. It is bribery. But Kiyoshi frames it as the natural order of things, a mainstream historical reality of the Edo period's gift-giving culture, where presents, or giri, were essential for oiling the wheels of social and bureaucratic interaction. You are not buying water, you are establishing an obligation. You return to the kitchen, your heart pounding harder than it did during your first glimpse of the shogun. You find Goro during a momentary lull. You don't mention the water. You simply bow and present the netsuki, mumbling something about having found it and thinking it might please a man of his refined tastes. Goro's eyes narrow, but he takes the badger, his thick fingers surprisingly delicate as they trace the carving. He pockets it without a word. You do the same with the brigade leader, offering the mushrooms for his esteemed household. He grunts, but takes the pouch. The next morning, when you arrive with your jar, the atmosphere is different. No one looks at you, but a full, smaller jar of water from the moon viewing well is sitting on a ledge to the side, clearly meant for you. Goro gives you a curt nod. No words are exchanged. The transaction is complete. Historians still argue whether this complex system of reciprocal gift-giving strengthened social bonds or was merely a thinly veiled form of institutionalized corruption that entrenched the power of gatekeepers. As you carry the precious water back to your chamber, you don't care about the scholarly debate. You have learned the first rule of survival beneath the surface. Even stones must sometimes trade with the other stones to ensure the pond remains smooth. The panic begins not with a shout, but with a sigh. It is the third week of your service, and you are performing the final, pre-drying visual inspection, holding the whisk up to the soft lantern light. You rotate it slowly, your eyes tracing the familiar paths along the 80 prongs. And then you see it. Not a break, not a crack, but a blemish. A tiny, almost transparent speck, no larger than a grain of pollen, clinging stubbornly to the inner curve of the 42nd prong. It is a fleck of dried tea, a minuscule failure from the last ceremony that survived the 17-step purification. Your blood runs cold. It is a stain of disrespect, a literal mark of impurity that would have been presented to the Shogun. You don't dare touch it. You lower the whisk, your hands trembling so violently you are afraid you will snap it in two. You place it back on its stand with a reverence bordering on terror and tone to Kiyoshi, who is preparing the incense. You cannot speak. You simply point, your fingers shaking. Kiyoshi's ancient calm evaporates. He moves to the stand, his movements for the first time sharp and urgent. He leans in, his nose almost touching the prong. He sees it. A single, hissed breath escapes his lips, a sound more frightening than any curse. What follows is a silent, palace-wide alarm. Kiyoshi does not run from the room. He moves to the door and slides it open just a crack. He makes a specific gesture with his hand, a small, fluttering motion like a wounded bird, to a junior page always stationed at the far end of the corridor. The boy's eyes widen, and he scurries away. Within minutes, a soft, pervasive tension settles over this entire wing of the castle. You hear the footsteps outside change their rhythm, becoming quicker, more purposeful. A senior tea master, a man so esteemed he usually floats 2 inches above the ground, arrives at the door of your chamber, his face a mask of controlled horror. He is shown the speck. He does not speak to you, does not even look at you. His conference with Kiyoshi is conducted in hushed, rapid whispers you cannot decipher. The solution is as drastic as the panic is silent. The entire day's schedule for the moon viewing tea room, where the Shogun was to have received a minor daimyo later that afternoon, is cancelled. The official reason, you later learn, will be a sudden, slight headache suffered by the Shogun. The real reason is on the end of the 42nd prong. But the ritual must not be delayed for long. A replacement whisk must be used. This is not a simple matter of grabbing a spare. The backup whisk, kept in a separate, even more secure alcove, is considered inferior, a temporary measure at best. Its use is an admission of a failure in the system, a tiny crack in the perfect facade. Its deployment requires the sealed permission of the head tea master himself, which is now being sought. Meanwhile, Kiyoshi turns his attention back to you and the contaminated whisk. The standard purification is no longer sufficient. This requires an emergency cleansing. He sends you, under the guard of a suddenly appeared samurai, to the apothecary's quarter for a specific, rarely used ingredient, powdered kozo paper, made from the inner bark of the mulberry tree. A remedy for such a catastrophe. The theory, as Kiyoshi hurriedly explains, is that the ultra-fine, absorbent powder, when applied with a specific badger hair brush, can lift the impurity without scratching the bamboo. You return with the small vial, your heart in your throat. Kiyoshi performs the operation himself, his hand steady as a rock. He dips the brush, taps off the excess, and with a breath held by everyone in the room, he gently touches the tip of the brush to the speck. It vanishes, absorbed into the white powder. The relief in the room is palpable, a physical drop in pressure. The backup whisk is never used. The official schedule is reinstated. The speck is gone. But the memory of the silent, efficient panic it triggered is now permanently seared into your mind. Historians still argue whether the infamous perfectionism of the Tokugawa court was a genuine cultural refinement or a neurotic obsession that wasted immense resources on trivialities. As you watch Kiyoshi meticulously brush the last traces of kozo powder from the prong, you understand it was never about the speck. It was about the absolute impossibility of the speck. It was about control. The secret ingredient is not written on a scroll or kept in a locked ledger. It is a memory, passed from one cleaner to the next in a hushed, moonlit ritual that feels more like a spy handing over state secrets than a craftsman sharing a recipe. After the near catastrophe of the tea speck, Kiyoshi seems to have decided you are, perhaps, not entirely hopeless. Or perhaps he is merely ensuring the knowledge does not vanish with him. He leads you one night, long after the castle has fallen into its deepest silence, to a part of the gardens you have never seen. It is a small, walled enclosure behind the main tea ceremony pavilion, filled not with decorative flowers, but with functional, fragrant plants. The air is thick with the scent of damp earth and night-blooming flowers. He stops before a small, unassuming bush with dark, waxy leaves and tiny, star-shaped white flowers. "This is kinmokusei," he whispers, the word like a secret. "The orange osman thus. Its flowers, when distilled, provide the scent for the final rinse." He plucks a single, minuscule blossom and crushes it between his thumb and forefinger, holding it under your nose. The fragrance is astonishingly potent, a blend of apricot, jasmine, and something deeply, mysteriously sweet. One handful of these flowers, picked only on the morning of the autumn equinox when the dew is still upon them, steeped for exactly one lunar cycle in the water from the moon viewing well. So that was one component. But then he leads you to a second plant, a low-growing, velvety-leafed herb. This is yomagi, mugwort, a single dried leaf, burned to ash and added to the steeping water. It counteracts the sweetness, adds depth. You nod, committing it to memory. But he is not finished. He walks to the very back of the enclosure, to an ancient, gnarled tree clinging to the wall. It is a saguaro cypress, its bark deeply fissured. He does not pick anything from it. Instead, he takes a small, silver knife from his sleeve and makes a tiny, careful incision in the bark. A single, glistening tear of sap wells up, clear and thick as honey. He catches it on the tip of the knife and transfers it to a tiny, pre-prepared vial of oil he carries. "This," he says, his voice filled with a reverence you've never heard before, "is the mountain's tear. One drop. No more. It binds the scents, makes them linger on the bamboo, a ghost of a promise in the steam of the tea." This is the complete recipe. The osman thus for the perfume, the mugwort ash for the balance, the cypress resin for the permanence. It is a masterpiece of subtle alchemy. This practice of infusing water with botanicals for the tea ceremony has mainstream historical roots, evolving from the Heian period's obsession with incense games and perfumed competitions among the aristocracy. But the specific combination Kiyoshi has just entrusted to you is unique to the Tokugawa shogunate, a formula guarded more closely than some military tactics. As you walk back through the silent gardens, the weight of this knowledge settles upon you. You are no longer just a cleaner, you are a keeper of a secret. You are part of a chain. The responsibility is terrifying. Historians still argue whether the secretive nature of certain tea ceremony traditions, with knowledge passed only orally from master to disciple, was a genuine spiritual transmission or a deliberate method of creating exclusive, powerful guilds. Holding the tiny vial containing the single, precious drop of resin, feeling its potential power, you suspect it was, again, both. The next day, when you prepare the final rinse for the first time with the full knowledge of its components, the act is transformed. It is no longer a mere step in a process. It is a culmination. As you lower the whisk into the celadon bowl, you smell the apricot jasmine of the osmanthus, the earthy hint of the mugwort, and the clean, sharp finish of the cypress. You are not just purifying a tool, you are anointing it with the essence of the castle's most hidden garden, preparing it to impart its silent, fragrant message to the most powerful man in Japan. The whisk is no longer just a whisk, it is a vessel, and you are its priest. The nighttime intrusion comes not with a forced door or a masked figure dropping from the rafters, but with a soft, insistent tapping, a sound like a bird pecking for worms, against the wooden frame of your tiny sleeping closet. You are jolted from a fitful sleep, your heart immediately hammering against your ribs. You lie perfectly still, hoping it is a dream, a trick of the old castle's settling bones. But it comes again, more deliberate this time. Tap, 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 tap. Slowly, you slide the door open a crack. The corridor is dark, lit only by a single, guttering night lamp far down the hall. A man stands there, shrouded in shadow. He is not dressed as a castle guard or servant. His kimono is of a finer, darker silk, and he carries no lantern. "You are the new one," he says, his voice a low, cultured murmur. It is not a question. The keeper of the chasen. He doesn't wait for an invitation. He simply slides the door open further and steps inside, closing it behind him with a quiet, final sound. Your room is so small his presence fills it, his scent of sandalwood and something metallic overwhelming the familiar smells of straw and old wood. "I represent interests that lie beyond these walls," he continues, his eyes glinting in the near darkness. They are curious about the carp in his pond. Does he still favor the thick foam? Does he take his tea before or after his morning consultations? Does the whisk ever travel? He sees you as a pawn. A vulnerable, overlooked piece on the board, so insignificant that no one would suspect you of playing the game. And he is right. You are terrified. He doesn't threaten you outright. The threat is in his mere presence, in the fact that he found you, that he knows your role. He opens a small, drawstring pouch and lets you see the contents. It is not gold, that would be too crude, too easily traced. It is a collection of uncut gemstones, their facets catching the faint light, glowing like the eyes of predatory animals in the dark. A fortune. Enough to buy your family out of poverty for 3 generations. "For your eyes," he whispers. "For the small things you see. The schedule of the tea masters. The mood of the shogun, as reflected in the urgency of the ceremonies. A single strand from the whisk, for verification." Your mind reels. A strand from the whisk? The very thought is a sacrilege that makes your skin crawl. This is the reality of the Tokugawa peace. The battles are fought with information, with whispers, with the exploitation of the weakest links. The mainstream historical fact of the daimyo system, where powerful regional lords were forced to spend every other year in attendance to the shogun in Edo, created a hotbed of espionage and intelligence gathering right here in the castle. Everyone was watching everyone else. And now, someone was watching you. Historians still argue whether this alternate attendance system, the Sankinkotai, was primarily a brilliant political tool to control the daimyo by bankrupting them with the cost of maintaining 2 households, or if its greatest effect was the unintended creation of a national culture and a centralized information economy. As you stare at the glowing stones in the spy's hand, the answer feels brutally simple. It was a system that created a market for men like him, and for traitors like the one he was asking you to become. You find your voice, though it is a dry, cracked thing. I see only the whisk," you stammer. I know only water and bamboo. It is the only defense you have, the mantra of the stone at the bottom of the pond. The man studies you for a long, silent moment, his face unreadable. He does not seem angry, merely assessing. He closes the pouch, the gems disappearing into the darkness. A man who sees only his duty is a rare thing, he says, his tone indecipherable. Or a foolish one. We will see which you are. He turns and slides the door open, melting back into the shadows of the corridor as silently as he arrived. You are left alone, shaking, the scent of his sandalwood lingering in the air like a poison. You have refused him. But you have a sickening feeling that this is not the end of it. You are now a player in the game, whether you want to be or not. The Shogun's bad day is heralded not by a shout, but by a change in the very texture of the silence that permeates the castle. It's a sharper, more brittle quiet, where the usual soft sounds of shuffling feet and distant conversations are entirely absent, as if the entire complex is holding its breath. You feel it even in your isolated purification chamber, a tension that transmits itself through the tatami mats and into your kneeling knees. Kiyoshi feels it too. His movements become even more measured, his instructions delivered in a near whisper, as if a normal speaking voice might shatter the fragile peace. The message comes via a pale-faced page who doesn't even enter the room, just slides the door open a sliver and hisses a single word, thick. Kiyoshi nods grimly. The Shogun has demanded a koicha ceremony, the thick tea. This is not the more common, frothy yusucha. This is a potent, almost paste-like concoction, a test of fortitude and spirit, and it is only called for in moments of high drama or deep contemplation. Today, it feels like the former. You prepare the whisk as usual, the ritual a comforting anchor in the unnerving stillness. But when the tea master returns the chasen an hour later, the atmosphere has not improved. The master's hands are trembling slightly, and he will not meet Kiyoshi's eyes. He places the whisk on its stand and retreats without a word. That is when you see it. A single prong, the seventh from the left on the eastern face, is snapped cleanly in half, hanging by a few woody fibers. The break is not a gentle splintering, it is a violent, clean snap. The whisk did not fail. It was broken. In the Shogun's hand. The silence in your chamber becomes absolute. This is beyond a speck of tea. This is a desecration. Kiyoshi stares at the broken tool, his face a mask of stone. There is no question of repair. A repaired whisk is an insult. There is no panic this time, only a deep, solemn dread. The procedure for this is ancient and grim. Kiyoshi sends you for a specific box made of unvarnished pine, a wood used for funerary rites. He does not touch the broken whisk with his hands. Using the copper pheasant feather, he transfers it from the stand into the pine box. The ceremony of its destruction is as rigidly formal as the ceremony of its use. You are both led, under escort, to a small, secluded courtyard usually used for the disposal of ritually impure objects. A small, clean pit has been dug. A priest from the castle shrine is present, chanting sutras in a low, monotone drone. The head tea master is there, his face ashen. The broken whisk in its pine coffin is placed into the pit. Then, Kiyoshi is handed a torch. This is part of the cleaner's duty. You must oversee the end. He thrusts the flame into the pit, and the dry pine box catches immediately. The bamboo, aged and oiled, burns with a quick, hot flame and a surprisingly sweet smell. You watch the prongs blacken and curl, the delicate structure that you knew so intimately collapsing into embers in seconds. It is a cremation. This ritual destruction of a broken or retired tea utensil is a known, fringe practice in the highest levels of the tea world, a symbolic acknowledgement of the spirit, or kami, believed to reside within a well-used object. But watching it now, under the grim, grey sky, with the shogun's foul mood hanging over the entire castle, it feels less like a spiritual send-off and more like an execution. Historians still argue whether the famous tempers of the Tokugawa shoguns were a result of the immense pressure of their office, the effects of inbreeding, or simply the whims of unchallenged autocrats. As you watch the last of the whisk turn to ash, you decide it doesn't matter. The reason for the bad day is irrelevant. The result is the same. Something beautiful and precise was shattered, and you were there to sweep its ashes into the earth. The carp had swished its tail, and a world had been destroyed. The journey to craft a replacement is a somber, silent procession. You, Kiyoshi, and two stone-faced guards travel not on the broad, clean main streets of Edo, but through a labyrinth of narrower, older lanes that cling to the edges of the city, where the smells of cooking and sewage and industry mingle in the damp air. The guards are not there for your protection. They are there to ensure you go directly to the artisan and directly back, with no deviations, no conversations, no risk of contamination from the outside world. For the first time in months, you are outside the castle walls, but you are less free than you ever were inside them. You are a parcel on a predetermined route. The weight of the broken whisk's destruction still hangs heavy upon you, a fine ash coating your spirit. The workshop of the Hidari family is not a grand establishment. It is a small, wooden building tucked away behind a fabric dyer's, the air thick with the sweet, resinous scent of curing bamboo. The sound of the street outside is muffled, replaced by the soft, rhythmic scraping of tools. An old man, his back so bent he seems to be examining his own feet, works at a low bench. He does not look up as you enter. This is Jubei, the only artisan whose family has been granted the exclusive, generations-long privilege of carving tea whisks for the Tokugawa shogunate. Kiyoshi bows deeply. You and the guards follow suit. The old man finishes the stroke he is making on a pale piece of bamboo before setting his tool down and finally looking at you. His eyes are like Kiyoshi's, ancient, calm, and seeing everything. The carp broke another, Jubei states, his voice a dry rustle. It is not a question. Kiyoshi simply nods. No further explanation is needed. The artisan's knowledge of the castle's moods, transmitted through the broken tools brought to his door, is a mainstream historical reality of the specialized craft guilds of the era, who held monopolies on providing specific goods to the shogunate. The Hidari family's entire world, their reputation, their livelihood, is bound to the whims of the man in the castle. Jubei gestures to a rack where dozens of raw bamboo whisks, pale and ghost-like, hang in a darkened corner, curing in the smoke from a small, smoldering fire. The one for the autumnal equinox is ready. You may take it. It was destined for him anyway. He speaks of the shogun not with reverence, but with a kind of weary familiarity, like a farmer discussing the weather. Kiyoshi is shown the chosen whisk. He inspects it with the same intensity he gives to the daily cleaning, his fingers tracing the newly carved prongs, his eyes searching for flaws. This is a critical part of the process you had never considered: the selection. The artisan carves many, but only 1 in perhaps 20 is deemed perfect enough for the shogun. The rest are sold, at immense cost, to high-ranking daimyo, their inferiority to the shogun's own a not-so-subtle reminder of the hierarchy. The one Kiyoshi selects is flawless, its prongs possessing that perfect, intentional irregularity, its handle already smoothed to a satin finish. The transaction is silent. Kiyoshi places the new whisk in a padded, silk-lined box he brought for the purpose. No money changes hands. The payment is an ongoing arrangement of privilege and obligation. As you turn to leave, Jubei's eyes fall on you. So, you are the new hands, he says. Do not let the bamboo forget it is grass. It is a strange, poetic thing to say. Historians still argue whether the relationship between the shogunate and its monopoly holders was a symbiotic partnership that fostered incredible artistic excellence or an exploitative system that bound brilliant craftsmen to a single, capricious patron. Watching Jubei return to his work, his gnarled hands bringing form to another piece of bamboo, you see the truth is, as always, a mixture. There is pride in his work, a deep, spiritual connection to his material. But there is also the unyielding weight of the carp in his pond, a force that could break his creations on a whim. The journey back to the castle is made in the same silence, but now you carry a new, unproven soul in a silk-lined box, a replacement for a ghost. Your duties expand, as silently and inevitably as moss creeping over a stone. There is no official decree, no change in your title. It simply happens. One morning, Kiyoshi hands you not just the ceramic water jar, but a new tool, a small, shallow spoon made of polished abalone shell, its edges thin as a leaf. The final rinse requires a different water now, he says. The dew from the third day of the third month has passed. We now use the tears of the shuro palm. You stare at him, wondering if this is some sort of poetic test. It is not. He leads you out into the pre-dawn gloom, into a section of the castle gardens you have only passed before. It is a grove of these palms, their broad, fan-like leaves glistening in the faint light. Your new task is to collect the droplets of dew that have settled in the specific, central groove of each leaf. You cannot simply shake the leaf or wipe it with cloth. That would disturb the water's purity. You must use the abalone spoon to gently coax each individual droplet, guiding it to the spoon's basin without ever touching the leaf's surface. It is maddeningly slow work. The droplets are elusive, merging with each other or slipping away just as you are about to capture them. A single leaf might yield only 3 or 4 usable spoonfuls after 10 minutes of painstaking effort. To fill your small vial requires you to visit over 50 leaves. Your back aches from the constant bending and the hyper-focused precision. The garden, which from a distance looked so serene and simple, is revealed to be a deceptively complex machine, every plant serving a precise, often exhausting, purpose. This connection between the tea ceremony and the specific harvesting of natural elements is a mainstream historical fact, part of the philosophy of wabi-sabi that finds beauty in imperfection and transience. Using dew collected from a specific plant on a specific day was the ultimate expression of this, a fleeting, natural moment captured and used in an act of high culture. As you work, the sky lightens from gray to a soft pink, and the castle begins to stir around you. You see other servants performing their own arcane tasks, a young girl carefully brushing the bark of a pine tree with a soft broom, an old man measuring the spacing between stepping stones with a set of brass calipers. The entire garden is a stage, and every element is a prop that must be perfectly maintained for the play of power that is the shogun's life. The reality of your new duty is the sheer, mind-numbing boredom of it, punctuated by moments of sheer panic when you almost spill a nearly full vial. It gives you too much time to think, to remember the spy's offer of uncut gems, to feel the phantom presence of the broken whisk. Historians still argue whether the intense, almost fetishistic, focus on these minute natural details in Japanese elite culture was a genuine spiritual path to mindfulness or a form of aristocratic escapism, a way to ignore the larger social problems brewing outside the castle walls. As a drop of dew, perfectly spherical and cool, finally rolls from a palm leaf into your abalone spoon, you don't feel spiritual or escapist. You feel like a human tool, an organic instrument tasked with harvesting another part of nature for the insatiable, invisible machine of the shogunate. By the time you return to the purification chamber, your vial full of palm tears, the sun is fully up, and your day with the whisk itself has not even begun. The stone at the bottom of the pond, you are learning, can have many layers, and some of them are very, very damp. The whisper network is the true nervous system of the castle, a subterranean river of information that flows beneath the polished floors and silent corridors. You are initiated into it not by a formal introduction, but by a shy glance, a slight nod, the extra piece of pickled radish placed on your rice bowl by the ancient woman who serves the lower servants' meals. Her name is Ofumi, and she has been scrubbing the stone steps of the main keep for 40 years. Her eyes, nearly lost in a web of wrinkles, see everything. It is she who slides onto the cushion next to you one evening as you sip your weak tea and whispers, without looking at you, the man in the dark silk. He is from the Date clan. Their lands are far to the north. They are always curious. This is how you learn the identity of your nighttime visitor. The information is given not as a gift, but as a tool for survival. Ofumi is the hub of a vast, informal network of cleaners, cooks, gardeners, and guards. The people who are, like you, the stones at the bottom of the pond. They are your best source of information and survival tips, far more reliable than any official bulletin. From a young guard whose post is near the shogun's private apartments, you learn the subtle signs of the carp's mood. The specific rhythm of his footsteps in the morning indicates whether it will be a day for thick tea or thin, a critical piece of intelligence that allows Kiyoshi to prepare the correct whisk. From a laundress, you learn which of the senior tea masters is having a secret affair, and is therefore more likely to be distracted and careless during his inspections. This unofficial intelligence apparatus was a mainstream historical feature of any large, pre-modern court. In the absence of a free press or transparent governance, the servants' gossip was often the most accurate, if not the only, source of real information. They knew which alliances were forming, which daimyo was in disgrace, where the secret passages were, and which food taster had just died. Their survival depended on this knowledge. The quirky tidbit you pick up from a stable boy concerns the shogun's favorite horse, a white stallion named Tsukikich. The boy confides that on the days the horse is particularly restless, the shogun is invariably in a foul temper. It is a bizarre correlation, but you file it away with all the other seemingly useless, potentially vital data. This network also becomes your early warning system. A week after Ofumi's initial warning, the young guard finds you replenishing the sandalwood strips in the drying alcove. The northern lord's man, he murmurs while pretending to adjust his sandal, has been asking about the new cleaner. He seems to think you were uncooperative. The message is clear. The spy has not forgotten you. He is assessing you, and his assessment so far is not positive. Historians still argue whether these intricate servant networks ultimately strengthened the shogunate by allowing a controlled venting of tensions and information, or subtly undermined it by creating a parallel, uncontrollable flow of intelligence that could be exploited by rivals. As you receive this whispered warning, your blood running cold, you feel neither strengthened nor undermined. You feel informed, and therefore, for the moment, still alive. You are learning that to be a successful stone, you must not only be smooth and clean, but also aware of the other stones, and the currents that move between them. The annual grand tea ceremony is not an event. It is a seismic shift in the castle's reality, a slow, grinding reorientation of every single life towards a single, perfect hour. For weeks, the entire complex hums with a suppressed frenzy. The tatami mats in the Great Hall are all ripped out and replaced with new ones, woven from rush harvested from a single, specific lagoon. The gold leaf screens are meticulously wiped with swan-down dusters. The air itself is scented with a different, more potent incense, burned day and night to prepare the atmosphere. For you and Kiyoshi, this means a state of perpetual, high-alert readiness. The whisk is no longer just the shogun's whisk. It is the centerpiece of the most important political and cultural display of the year, where the most powerful daimyo in Japan will kneel and receive tea from the shogun's hand, a ritual reaffirmation of their loyalty. Your purification rituals double, then triple. Every step is performed twice, inspected by a rotating panel of senior tea masters whose nerves are as frayed as old rope. The pressure is immense. A single flaw now would not mean a silent vanishing. It would be a public, catastrophic humiliation for the entire Tokugawa regime. The whisk, your whisk, is placed squarely in the center of this maelstrom. You find yourself dreaming of its 80 prongs, each one a potential gateway to your doom. Kiyoshi, sensing the strain, offers his only form of comfort, a single, additional piece of advice. On the day, he whispers during a moment alone, do not think of the daimyo. Do not think of the shogun. Think only of the bamboo. It was once grass, growing on a mountainside. Remember the mountain. The rest is just weather. It is a desperate attempt at philosophy, but you cling to it. The day of the ceremony dawns, unnervingly clear and still. The castle is so silent it feels like a painted image. You and Kiyoshi perform the final, ultimate purification, a version of the ritual that includes 3 extra incense passings and a final rinse made with water you collected yourself from the shuro palms, mixed with the last of the equinox osmanthus infusion. The whisk has never been more pristine, its bamboo seeming to glow with an inner light. When the head tea master comes to collect it, he does not simply take it. He receives it from Kiyoshi's hands with a deep, formal bow, his forehead touching the tatami mat. The whisk is placed on a special stand of gold-lacquered wood and carried away like a holy relic, surrounded by an honor guard. You are left in the suddenly empty purification chamber, the silence roaring in your ears. There is nothing to do now but wait. The ceremony itself takes place in a hall you will never see. You and Kiyoshi kneel in your chamber, listening to the overwhelming silence, trying to decipher the distant, muffled sounds of the event. You imagine the procession, the kneeling, the slow, deliberate motions of the tea master. You imagine the whisk, your whisk, being taken up, its prongs dipping into the vibrant green powder, the hot water being poured, the swift, practiced whipping motion that creates the perfect foam. You imagine it being raised, presented, placed before the shogun. You imagine his hands, the ones that broke the last whisk, lifting the bowl. Historians still argue whether these grand, state-sponsored tea ceremonies were effective in cementing the political loyalties of the daimyo or if they were merely expensive, hollow pageants that everyone saw through. As you kneel in the breathless silence, waiting for the world to either end or continue, you understand that the question is irrelevant. The power was in the belief, in the shared fiction of harmony and order, a fiction that was, for this one moment, frothing perfectly in a bowl held in the shogun's hands, created by the whisk you cleaned. The cycle continues not with a grand pronouncement, but with the arrival of a boy. He stands in the doorway of the purification chamber, his eyes wide with the same animal terror you once felt, his hands clenched at his sides in the exact same way. He is perhaps a year or 2 younger than you were, his frame still thin from a peasant's diet, his brand new, dark blue servant's kimono hanging off him like a shroud. Kiyoshi, his own back a little more stooped, his movements a fraction slower, gestures for the boy to enter. "This is Ren," he says, his voice the same low, calm whisper that once guided you. "He will assist us." You look at Ren, and you see your own past staring back at you, the confusion, the fear, the dawning horror of the responsibility. You have served for years now. The spy from the north eventually lost interest, or was reassigned. The head of the water brigade, Goro, now greets you with a grunt of recognition. You have become part of the castle's furniture, a smooth, predictable stone. Kiyoshi has you demonstrate the initial visual inspection. You lift the whisk, the same replacement you journeyed to Jubei to retrieve all those years ago, now seasoned and darkened with age and care. You hold it up to the lantern light, your hands perfectly steady, your breathing even. You must memorize every curve, you say to Ren, and the words are Kiyoshi's words, coming from your mouth. You will know the exact flexibility of every single prong. You point out the tiny, almost imperceptible ridge on the third prong from the left on the southern face. Ren nods, his Adam's apple bobbing as he swallows hard. You see him trying to absorb it all, the sheer, crushing weight of the knowledge being dropped upon him. The mainstream historical fact that strikes you now, after all this time, is the sheer stability of the system. The Tokugawa shogunate presided over the Great Peace, over 200 years with no major internal wars, a feat unprecedented in Japanese history. And this peace was maintained by a million tiny, repetitive, unyielding rituals just like this one. The passing of a whisk from one set of trembling hands to another, the unbroken chain of duty, was a microcosm of the entire era. It was a society built on the principle that nothing should ever change, that every stone should remain in its appointed place. Historians still argue whether this unparalleled stability came at too high a cost, stifling innovation and social mobility. But from within the machine, the cost and the benefit are the same thing. It is simply the water you swim in. You guide Ren through the first steps of handling the purification silk, showing him how to fold it, how to apply the 3 drops of Kyra-infused water. His first attempt is a smeared mess, just like yours was. You do not reprimand him. You simply take the silk from his hand, discard it into the impure basket, and give him a new one, just as Kiyoshi did for you. The boy looks at you, his eyes filled with a desperate gratitude for this small mercy. You give him a slight, almost imperceptible nod. It is the only comfort you can offer. The cycle is complete. You are no longer the apprentice. You are the master. The ghost of Ato has not been appeased. It has simply been passed on, and now you must teach the new ghost how to haunt these walls without causing a disturbance. The whisk must be cleaned. The pond must remain still. And so, the relentless wheel of duty turns, each generation finding its place in the ancient, unyielding rhythm of the castle. The fears that once gripped your heart so tightly have softened now, not into courage, but into a kind of familiar acceptance, a deep and abiding knowledge that you are a single, small note in a song that began long before you and will continue long after. The shogun may age, the daimyo may scheme, and the seasons will undoubtedly change outside these thick, white walls. But here, in the quiet stillness of the purification chamber, the ritual remains. The scent of incense, the feel of the feather, the cool weight of the water jar in your hands, these are the constants, the anchors in the stream of time. Let the weight of that history, of that endless, peaceful cycle, settle over you now. Let the image of the carefully held whisk, the patiently taught lesson, the smooth, dark bamboo, lull your mind into a state of quiet reverence for all the small, unseen things that hold the world together. Breathe in the silence, breathe out the worry, and feel yourself, just for tonight, as perfectly placed and peaceful as a stone in a still, still pond.